Hi everyone, and welcome to your tarot guidance for the week of February the 21st, 2022. Before I begin the reading, once again I would like to apologize. It is definitely not my best performance, but I'm still finding it pretty difficult and challenging to do tarot work and channel because it reminds me so much of my mom. We used to work together a lot. So I'm really sorry. Now, this is definitely a really interesting week, and at least from an astrological perspective, the beginning of a very intense and really interesting period up ahead. And there is a lot of karmic energy and also mystical force in the air. So a lot of destined events and, destined twists and turnarounds of things in life are bound to happen, because this is where we just entered Pisces season, and the Pisces season of 2022 is extra special. Chances are most of us have never ever lived through such an interesting energy in all of our lives. This is where two rulers of Pisces are in their sign at the same time, Jupiter and Neptune. So that is, things, states, experiences, and even, physical, down-to-earth experiences that we have never ever even imagined of living through. And where I'm going with this is, every year it is Pisces season when the most karmic events, fated things, completions, closures, and of course this is where even internally it is this period of the year when we have this tendency to do purification work, to release, to find forgiveness, to recalibrate ourselves, to rebalance ourselves in any way, shape, and form. So if we add to this the fact that this is such a rare and totally unique Pisces season that none of us will ever experience in this lifetime again, well, the kind of purification and healing, recalibration, release, forgiveness, etc., this year are gonna be really powerful, and they will basically cleanse many of us from like almost permanent traumas, hurts, and wounds for the rest of our lives. So that is a really good energy and once in a lifetime opportunity. Of course, this is the higher expression of the energy. And the cards of this week immediately start reflecting that it's a very important period, and not just for us personally, not just for us as individuals, but also collectively as well. We are living in a very special age when, both the needs and the karmic path of the individual and the collective are equally as important, relevant, and they're basically being co-created simultaneously, at the same time. So that gives us, the people, those who are experiencing reality, a lot of extra work, a lot of extra processing, a lot of extra sensibilities, vulnerabilities, fears, and inner psychological processes that we never even imagined of ever living through. So this is where we also have to be very understanding with ourselves. None of us ever lived through such times. So we have to be very gentle and give ourselves some space to breathe and do everything in our power to nurture ourselves back into balance, a state where we can at least operate from, and a state where, minimally we have some peace, some equilibrium within ourselves. Of course, for each and every one of us, that looks differently. That is something totally different in nature or in specifics, because a balanced state is different for everyone. But the work for this, the inner work part, has already been done, has already been completed. So basically now we're just getting what we planted. This is a kind of harvest season, but from a more spiritual perspective, from a more karmic perspective, not necessarily in correlation with the four seasons, physically speaking. So the first card is the Lovers, and this, even from a collective perspective, is pretty significant because it does represent that there is going to be a heightened effort, an investment of energy and everything that they have in order to create a state of peace, however that is possible and applicable on the world stage. So that also represents the ongoing tension from Russia and everything else that is going on in the world. So this is going to be a week when everyone, the players on the international stage will put a lot of extra effort into creating harmony and peace, one that is palpable and can last. So this is not a period for quick measures. This is where they're really, really trying to do it meticulously in order for this situation not to even have a chance to escalate. Now, of course, the success is not guaranteed. Nothing is really set in stone, but as long as the effort and genuine intent is there, that is already good news because it will keep the situation in a certain kind of control as much as it is possible. And this is also reinforced by the Justice card because collectively it does represent diplomatic negotiations, and because it's an upright position, well, those are in a greater measure successful, even if the negotiations don't necessarily go as intended, but at least they show some results, some effort, there is communication, there is some kind of, settling. But on the other hand, this can also represent a lot of important legal projects, not just collectively speaking internationally, but also in your country, in your local community. This can represent, upgrades in legislation. This can also represent, especially internationally, human rights, or re-examining from a legal perspective how the COVID measures and the legislative side of that was handled. Was it fair? Was it not fair? Was it correct? Was it not correct? And maybe there can be discussions of a big compensations owed to citizens, perhaps. Maybe this is a little bit utopic, but that is one of the most, let's say, idealistic expressions of this energy. But at the same time, there can also be either a big conclusion or a new, very famous legal case that will, be on the news, be in talks, discussions, be a big subject, and will be very relevant for judicial practices. And this can also be like a case of discrimination or something like that. So something is definitely going to be on the news. And last but not least, we also have the Ace of Cups, which does represent some fated event taking place somewhere, but this comes through as a blessing. So this might even represent some kind of natural phenomenon that we people kind of subjectively interpret as a bad blessing or a really, really positive, hopeful sign somewhere. But at the same time, the Ace of Cups, internationally speaking, collectively, can always represent some big news or some big events in the artistic or spiritual world. So this can be like a speech or a very strong and inspirational gesture of a world religious leader like the Pope, for example. But this can also represent something in the music industry, in the field of art and the artistic side of media, if that even makes sense. So like a big new star to be born out of nowhere, surprisingly, someone will ascend very, very quickly in the artistic world. But equally, this can also mean a big loss. We may lose a big artist, and the Ace of Cups can represent their transformation from physical to spirit, like the birth of a muse. We may lose an artist here down on earth, but we gain an extra muse spirit, because you can imagine what an extra inspirational power the spirit of an artist has. And usually spirits of artists will inspire new artists, students of arts, etc., etc. So, this can represent the ascent into spirit of a big artist. And finally, the conclusion is said by the emperor. So, this does mean that, collectively speaking, everything in the world is going to be taken a lot more seriously. It will mean attempts of control, which is both positive and negative, because you can imagine that control is going to be imposed even on our liberties and rights, and that will spark a massive response. But as we can see from the previous cards, the massive response is going to be met, at least in a very, very good attempt diplomatically, or people just get what they are protesting for. So this will show results. Yes, there is going to be a lot of effort to gain control, perhaps even abuse or misuse of power, but at the same time, the response of people is going to be taken seriously as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to lead to greater conflict, but the opposite, a resolution, an agreement, a settlement. So that is quite positive. Now, individually speaking, this has even greater karmic connotations, because the lovers can represent, for many of us, an old connection, an old, perhaps soulmate, an old best friend, or those of you who are single, an old lover is going to return in your life, and a karmic relationship is going to be put on the table, where both and this person have to decide where you take it next. Or, of course, if you want to go forever separate ways, this is just like a karmic confrontation, so to speak. So you will definitely show that person who you are now, what you have done with your life, how you transformed into your present self. That person will do the same. And then, of course, you will decide together and draw conclusions. And for a lot of people, this is going to be like a big restart of an old relationship, a massive rebirth. It is like this love story will get even better and more romantic than it ever was. For other people, this is like the birth of a new friendship, a new alliance, where maybe once they were lovers, but now they can be really good friends or allies or partners in other ways. It doesn't necessarily have to represent love. For some people, the partner, the lover's card in tarot is the correspondent of Gemini. So there has to be two elements to the lover's card always. So the other element can be work, career. It can be anything that would offer you a sense of completion, wholeness, and stability. Now, this Justice card is equally as important, because this can either represent sufficient clarity, sufficient motivation, sufficient, basically, knowledge of self in order to make a big life-impacting decision or choice. It doesn't mean that this week you necessarily have to take action, but it means that you will simply already know your truth and know where you will want to take your life or something in your life next. Now, this can also represent either favorable evolution or completion of legal cases, court cases, anything that has to do with legal matters, for example, divorce or taxes or some important document maybe you're waiting for or you requested, etc., etc. So there can be a lot of forward momentum regarding anything that has to do with legal stuff or administrative stuff, where the other person is an institution or a bank or a company or basically not a person. But combined with the Lover's card, together this can also represent commitment, where you enter into a relationship and the justice is just your promise to be a partner to that person. So for a lot of people, this is where they're definitely not going to be single anymore, because if we add the Ace of Cups to it, well, it will feel like a blessing. The Ace of Cups is also love and romance, divine inspiration. So, and the Emperor, well, you are the king or queen of your castle, because you're in a new relationship. So of course you feel in control, or even when you do not have control, it's the good kind of chaos, sense of adventure. And also, you are actually the emperor in the life of that other person, and vice versa, of course. But, separately, this Ace of Cups can represent blessing of other nature. I do imagine for artists it's gonna be a new project, an epiphany, a moment of brainstorming when something so unique and original is born. That can be very well one of the expressions of the Ace of Cups. For other people, it is just gonna be a fated event where whatever that fated event is, well, it's gonna make them feel like something is complete, there was divine justice, or simply a state of emotional satisfaction when you're actually more than okay. And because it was also fated, well, you feel that much stronger that the divine has your back. And the Emperor individually, well, it can represent a lot of action, a lot of choices, you being in control with everything really important that is going on in your life. It is where some people will start building projects, building a career, building like physically even a house, or start working on something that will give them a sense of great stability in their lives. So this can be very, very creative, but this can also be something which is, a bit more ambitious, or a test of endurance rather than creativity, but it has a great result. It has a great promise. And chances are, maybe it's not time for big action yet, but maybe a lot of us are going to be planning to do something very significant as soon as Aries season starts, because that is the Emperor Aries. So when the sun enters the sign of Aries, the second half of March. And as divine guidance, finally, we have the 8 of Fire and the 2 of Air. Well, this is so very symbolic, because the 8 of Fire does represent very, very quick and very tumultuous action, especially on the world stage, but also our own individual lives. It can also represent very quick, sudden turnaround of events. Sometimes it can even represent like solar flares or some cosmic rays disrupting technology here on Earth, so that might also be in the theme of next week. But of course, individually speaking, this does mean quick communication, quick turnaround of events, fate very, very quickly changing things around. So basically everything that the previous cards represented, that coming in your life very quickly, suddenly, and you don't have that much time to react. And this is where the 2 of Swords comes into play, and that is basically the divine guidance. Try and make any decision, any choice, or more importantly, the way you react, the way you respond to external events, whatever those may be, the very best way for us in those surprising moments to be totally, or as much as possible, in tune with our instincts and intuition and every part of our beings at the same time. So of course that means intellect and emotion and the heart as well, is if we try our hardest to approach everything from a state of calm, where we do not allow ourselves to get anxious and to see everything with a sense of great urgency, great haste, great crisis or drama. We must try and look at things from a very down-to-earth approach, but most importantly, taking into consideration our greatest inner values, because that is the core of who we are, and everything and every choice that we do in our lives actually stems from that, our soul level values. And if we know ourselves and if we know our values, then nothing that comes in our way, suddenly, unexpectedly, good or bad, is not going to destabilize us in those critical moments, and we will have that inner power to make a relevant and rational and at least safe and sound choice, or know at least what our intuition, our instinct, or one deeper part of our being is telling us. So, as divine guidance, this week we must try our hardest to approach everything that comes our way from the state of calm, from a state of deep self-knowledge and also self-trust. Well, this is what the cards have to say for this week. Thank you so much for being here and listening, and of course allowing me to play a small role in your journeys. If you'd like to support my channel, you can donate in the PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, bye for now.